Hey guys, this is your friend Mayank, founder of SwiftAnytime.com, back again with another interesting episode of the Mayank Show. This is going to be episode 13, and I'm going to host a very special guest today whose name is Salman. I call him Sel. So Sel is basically based out of Bahrain, and he has built two companies so far in tech space. He has also lived in two countries before that. He has lived in Japan and US for quite some time. And today we will be discussing how to build a tech company, what are the struggles of building a tech company, how to manage a team, what is leadership, and a lot of good things around that, right? So without any further ado, let's roll the intro. Thank you so much for coming to the Mayank Show, and I'm really happy today that this is, I know, your very first podcast officially, guys. So yeah, I'm really glad that the first one is with me, and I'm getting this opportunity to hear the word of wisdom from you, since you have worked a lot in the entrepreneurship space, and you must be having a lot of experiences as well, about which we will be talking in just few minutes. But would you like to introduce yourself to my audience so that they can also get to know more about you, and then we can start off with your journey?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. My name's Sal. It's short for Salman, and I started a few companies. Beginning with sort of 4 years ago, when I took my first steps into entrepreneurship, and yeah, the first real company I started is called Ilya, and this is the logo right behind my head. And yeah, I can get into it a little bit later if you like, but it's a quantum computing company. You can check out the website at ilya.io. And I don't know what else. What else would you know?
Okay, I think that was a quite brief introduction about you, and quite humble as well, since I know what all things you have done, but you kept it very low key while introducing yourself. So that's your choice, and that's it's so humble of you that you introduce yourself in that way.
I'm also kind of nervous, but okay.
All right, that happens. I think that also happened when I had my very first podcast, which we recorded with the Jared, and we both of us had the same kind of feeling because it was new for both of us. So we fumbled a lot in between, but I think this is how it happens. This is more of a real conversation that we're currently having. So my very first question to you would be, Sel, that I know already that you are in this entrepreneurship space for quite some time. I think 4 to 5 years, if I'm not wrong. Right.
That's correct.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I know this. So what makes me curious is that I know that entrepreneurship is not something which is very common in your youth, and you face a lot of difficulties while even thinking about it. People tell you that it's not a stable space to be, and a lot of other things as well. So I would like to ask you that how did you come up with this idea of starting something of yourself, and why entrepreneurship? Why not something else?
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought up sort of youth, because most of the messaging that all of us get is that we're a lot safer staying on sort of the known track. Mm-hmm. And taking the step to entrepreneurship was something that I've always had in mind. So ever since I was very young, I always admired people that built their own things. But taking the step from a full-time job, which is what I had before, into entrepreneurship was a very, very difficult one. Probably one of the most difficult decisions that I've made so far. Mm-hmm. But I mean, at least at the time, it was very, very hard. There were many difficult decisions along the way, but the messaging we get is often to stay on the same track. And what I always tell young entrepreneurs is that they should follow their heart, because there are a lot of young people out there that, they have full-time jobs, but sort of their body is kind of rejecting it. They don't really enjoy it every day. Every day they think of quitting. They just dream of the day when they get this sort of break. But the truth is, we need to give ourselves that break. So I always encourage young people, if they have some curiosity and interest and a desire to leave, especially when they're young, like I'm
Hmm.
talking 20s, anywhere in
Right.
your 20s,
Right.
um, you should go ahead and do it because you really have nothing to lose, especially when you're young. Yeah.
Hmm. So, what made you actually leave your job, your full time job that you were doing? So, can we go to the timeline of when you were doing your job and how did you decided to come up, with this decision of leaving it completely and then moving into this
Yeah.
space? What was going on in your mind at that point of time? And actually, what was your mindset, to be honest? This is what I want to know.
So I briefly started entrepreneurship in my early 20s, like around 23, 24, but I
Mm-hmm,
didn't really build anything and put it out there.
mm-hmm,
So then I decided to try a full-time job. But around the time that you're asking about, the time that I left, I was just dreaming of leaving. Like at that point, it was like my heart was telling me to leave, but my
okay.
mind, the sort of logical part of my being was like, no, don't do it. So it was like bringing in a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm,
But there are a lot of choices you have to take, especially in when we're young and in our, especially I always go back to our 20s because I feel like it's that time, that decade where we explore a lot.
right.
There are decisions we have to take from our hearts. And I think that was a heart choice. There was nothing logical
Mm-hmm,
that makes sense. It wasn't like, I built something and it was working. It wasn't like I had a lot of experience in software engineering
mm-hmm,
or quantum computing.
mm-hmm.
Um, at that point, I sort of dabbled in a lot of things, but yeah, but I just took the leap. I think it was just a leap of faith.
Okay. Okay. So you just said that nothing makes sense when you try to make that kind of decision if you don't have the idea ready with you, right? It's all about your calling. If you are actually going to make it, then you will actually take this decision. Otherwise, you will stick with whatever you are doing.
Yeah, and nothing will prepare you for it. So
Mhm,
it's really what's in your heart. If you're ready for it, then you got to just take the jump and kind
mhm.
of
On
do
that
it.
note, I would like to know that what is entrepreneurship for you? How would you define entrepreneurship for you since you are there in this space for last 5 years now? So you must have figured out a lot of things. You must have explored a lot of things. So
Right.
now, if I ask you, maybe 5 years back, the definition of entrepreneurship would be different for you, which
Right.
which might be different now. So what was it for you back then, and what is for you now?
So back then I had zero experience in entrepreneurship because I never really built anything.
Mm-hmm,
So I'd say entrepreneurship is simply building things.
mm-hmm,
That's it. And building it sort of with your heart, because a lot of the time people get confused. They get very confused about um, like chasing the trend of the day, and they don't really focus on what makes them come alive, what makes them really feel good.
right.
And for entrepreneurs, I always say, if you want to find your passion, then just find what makes you come alive. Like when you're
Mm-hmm,
doing it, you just truly enjoy it. And for me, it was always design. Like it
mm-hmm,
was combining design on one side and a very difficult technical problem on another. And actually, the quantum Ilya was a perfect example because the product is a quantum IDE.
okay,
So, yeah, so when you program quantum computers, you do it on the bit level and you do it on this like with circuits.
okay.
So if you have like a 50 qubit computer, you'd
Mm-hmm,
have 50 lines, like 50 circuits, and you would
all
have
right.
this kind of composer to write your code.
Mm-hmm,
And each circuit would be one bit. So bringing that kind of complexity, someone who's never programmed quantum computers before, how do you make it interesting, exciting? How do you make the design something appealing, something that they'd want to do and
mm-hmm.
enjoy doing? I think that's entrepreneurship for me. It's just building things.
Building
Yeah,
things which people can actually make use of, right?
yeah. In the end, right? In the end, you have to serve the market somehow,
Right.
but you have to start from yourself. I think that's where people get lost. People start with the market,
Right.
and that can be, the market changes. There are new fads every year, and
True.
it's important to do what you really enjoy, and then
Hmm.
hopefully find a way to offer people a new experience.
Hmm.
Um, that really, yeah,
Okay.
that's it for me.
Okay. So with you starting off your very first venture, which is LAI, as you just rightly mentioned, I
Mhm.
can see that logo behind you. Can you explain
Right.
me what did you think of before making this logo? Because I feel this is the very first question that came to my mind by looking at this logo when I personally encountered it for the very first time. So I would like to know the answer for that today.
So this logo is interesting. This was made by a calligrapher.
Okay.
So I initially, this wasn't supposed to be a logo for a software company. It was a logo that I worked on about 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
I
Okay.
worked on, yeah, much earlier, and I had this sort of in my file, and I just sort of kept it because I loved it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, it is a work of art. This is done by a calligrapher.
All right.
I put the name, and I told him that I wanted the Arabic language to be inside the logo,
All right.
because I didn't want to write anything. I just wanted the English letters below.
Okay.
So actually over here, it's like some really contemporary calligraphy
Mm-hmm.
where it's like letters jumbled up in an interesting order, and
Okay.
it's made to look like a star, because
All right.
Ilya actually means North Star.
All right. North Star. All right.
Yeah, so that's why there's this whole space theme. So it's
Okay.
supposed to fit in. Um, it's supposed to fit in uh, with the meaning of the word. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
so
when you started off Alia, did you already think of making this product in quantum computing, or did you have a lot of ideas out of which you chose one and decided to go with it?
I actually, so that's an interesting story. I learned software engineering at a boot camp in Tokyo, and
Okay.
we originally did web development. And
So before you, sorry to interrupt you in between, but
no, it's fine. Go ahead.
before you went to Tokyo, as you just said that you had this boot camp, like what
Yeah.
made you make you like go to Tokyo to have your boot camp over there and then start off with this journey in software engineering?
I always liked software. I have to
Okay.
admit, like, it
Okay.
was always a passion of mine. I just never found something, I never combined it with design.
Okay.
So yeah, so you know, it wasn't obvious to me that sort of software is a path towards design. I sort
Mm-hmm.
of did design earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
That's where this came from. And then software came a lot later. It was like this part, when you sort of, you're curious about something, and you always were, like, since you were a
Right.
kid. I'm sure you have stuff like that
Yeah.
as well. I'm sure everyone does. But you never really explore it. And then when you grow
Mm-hmm.
older, you're like, wait, there's that thing that I never tried that I think is sort of a part of what I like and a part of
Mm-hmm.
me. So it was that sort of thing where I really wanted to do software. I was very curious about it, and I never really did it before. So, um, but anyways, after I learned web development,
Mm-hmm.
the software industry is so big, and there's so much you could do.
Right.
I sort of, yeah, at that time it was AI, it was blockchain. Those were the hyped up stuff. Maybe still are. Maybe not so much.
So we are talking about which year currently?
2018.
2018. Okay.
Not so long ago.
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, 4 years in a
Yeah.
week.
Almost. Yes.
Yeah. So it was still sort of the same stuff, AI, blockchain. And I never, AI was fun, blockchain was okay. But when I found quantum computing,
Mm-hmm.
it just the curiosity I had for that subject just pulled me into it in full force, because I always loved the elegance of programming on the bit level,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the way they used to do back in the 70s, like back in the early days of the computer revolution. So
Right.
quantum computing had a bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
You program, qubit to qubit, and it's pretty hard. Like quantum writing software for quantum computers is hard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so challenging and so rewarding when you make something that works, even if it's just a
So is
circuit.
this software that you made in quantum computing, is it only servable to the enterprises, or it is also useful to the individuals, like maybe students?
Yeah, it is useful to individuals. So it's useful to anyone that wants to write code for a
Okay.
quantum computer.
Okay.
And I can get into detail because there was so much like amazing work that was done in the back
Yeah.
end.
How does it really help? Like, what
So
problem
the
does it really
simulation,
solve, and how does it help to suppose a 21-year-old student?
yeah. So say you're 21 and you're really curious about quantum computing and you want to get started writing your first few programs.
Mm-hmm.
You'd need to use some kind of online tool. So there are many tools out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's Qiskit by IBM, which runs on your terminal. So if you're a software engineer, that's a little maybe a little easier, maybe something you'd prefer.
Okay.
It's written in Python. But for people who aren't software engineers, who don't want to work on their terminal, they need something that's more available online, just a website you can go to and kind of just get started working.
All right.
So that's what the IDE is. It gives you sort of an online GUI circuit
Mm-hmm.
where you could sort of drag and drop. It also has
Mm-hmm.
its own little terminal on the left side of the screen.
Okay.
So yeah, we have a GitHub repo with all the commands and that you can type in order to populate the circuit. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you're done writing your code, there's a button to simulate.
Okay.
And that's it. It's basically a space for you, sort of like, I guess, Replit. I guess Replit's the same. It's sort of an
Yeah.
online, yeah,
Yeah.
sort of the same thing. Yeah, but
Okay.
for quantum.
And
Yeah.
and if I ask you that if somebody wants to try this out, maybe somebody is listening to this podcast currently and want to try out this amazing product in quantum computing and this particular IDE, I would say. So what steps should that person take to take maybe a trial of this product?
So there's a free version, but it's very simple. It doesn't have the terminal. It doesn't have a lot of things, but it's just the GUI, like the just the few circuits and the GUI. I would say if you want a free trial, probably email me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a free trial.
Mm-hmm.
Just info@ilya.io. I'm very happy to give you a free 30-day trial.
Mm-hmm.
And and I hope people that are testing it out are curious about quantum computers and are interested in programming them and learning the math behind them, because
Right.
that's the thing. Programming a quantum computer is not the most, it's very different from like watching tons of videos on YouTube. Like YouTube doesn't require, right? It doesn't require any effort. You can kind of just
Right.
click onto videos
Right.
and listen. But with programming quantum computers, you have to be very intentional. Like you have to have
I
that
thought
math.
I thought you would compare it with developing an application.
Maybe, but it's actually even a little harder. A
Uh-huh.
little bit harder. So because there isn't a useful application for quantum computers, not yet.
Okay.
There are some algorithms, And
Mm-hmm.
you can go on to, I think it's the website's called Quantum Algorithm Zoo or something like that.
Okay.
Uh, it has, if you just Google that, I'm pretty sure it'll pop up. You can
Mm-hmm.
see all the different algorithms for quantum computers, but coming up with a practical use case.
Mm-hmm.
I can show you a recommendation algorithm,
Mm-hmm.
but that's very different from watching videos on YouTube or, a search engine. Like a practical application is not that, sometimes not very related to an algorithm.
Okay.
Um, yeah, well, like
Mm-hmm.
with software, it was mainly just uh, just graphics, like a screen. What could you do on a screen? What could you display? When
Okay.
you connect a bunch of computers, you get the internet, and then you get all this information that people can access.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very different from a recommendation algorithm or a cryptography algorithm.
Okay.
Um, yeah, like if you look at one of the most famous algorithms is Shor's algorithm, which I'm sure anyone who's searched quantum computing has come across this. It's an algorithm that can break RSA encryption
Okay.
because it factor prime numbers. So um, it could break a large prime number down into two constituents.
Mm-hmm.
But taking that from that kind of mathematical problem into something that you want to kind of doom scroll every day
Okay.
is it's pretty different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. So, how much
yeah.
time did you take to build this software and how did you market this? And will you also like to share the experience that you had with the market, how the people responded to it, and what were their insights to the software?
So it took about, I'd say in the last stretch, it took around 8 months. But before that, we
Okay.
worked for about a year
Mm-hmm.
prior.
Mm-hmm.
It's just exploring quantum computing, looking at all the different algorithms and seeing if there's something practical we could do. Because the main intention with Ilya was to have the first practical application. And so it was a
Okay.
lot of research. It was a lot of
Okay.
research early on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can get back to that later. There are some hardware hurdles
Okay.
nowadays. But back to your question on marketing and testing the market. So when Google, I'm pretty sure anyone who searched quantum computing has come across that Google quantum supremacy claim where so Google put out an article, I think it was like November of 2019,
Okay.
where they claimed that they created, they ran an algorithm faster on a quantum computer that a classical computer couldn't solve. Sorry, I explained that in a really bad way. But
No worries.
if you Google quantum, if you just search quantum supremacy claim by Google, you'll kind of get even the research paper, you'll get all the details about that. But
Right.
basically that a quantum computer could solve a problem that a classical computer could not, or
Mm-hmm.
could do it, but in a much longer time.
Okay.
And when it came to marketing, after Google published that, things changed. Many people were interested in quantum computers, and many
Hmm.
people were curious about them and what they could do. And then sort of the news it died down a little bit, and it came back to just people in the industry, professors, PhD researchers. And that was very interesting to be in that environment and be
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by those brilliant people.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say in general, people, like, it was hard to convince people to take up quantum computing um, because it's a big ask
Okay.
versus, say, if we were marketing, if there was a product, like there was something that quantum computers could do,
Mm-hmm.
and it affected something that you do in your daily life,
Right.
that marketing that would have been a lot easier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So did
So
you interact with the quantum computing community or took some
yeah,
sessions with them and and pitched them what you have made and how they can make use of it for their betterment?
I
So did
did.
you do all of these things and what kind of response did you get from the people when they used the product?
The response varied because many people used other IDEs. So many people used Qiskit because it's,
Okay.
uh, yeah, because it's in Python, and it was just a lot easier for a lot of young people to use.
Hmm.
Younger students were learning Python, like young software engineers were learning Python first. So
Right.
that was a big um, advantage for IBM. But yeah, I'd say it was just, I think the cause, the main intention, the reason for building it was like a big ask, making an IDE where people could write full programs.
Hmm.
That's kind of hard. That's like a lot of quantum computing, a lot of the math behind it
Hmm.
is done, was done on like on boards, like
Okay.
Shor's algorithm and Grover's search algorithm, two of the most popular algorithms and sort of use cases.
Hmm.
They were just done on a board. Like, can you imagine all that math?
Wow.
It's impressive. So
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
So, how did you come along with this, and how did you find out that, as I already know, that you came up with another product? So, how did you make the decision to make your transition between building, Alia, this software and quantum computing, and then
Yeah.
moving on to that one? What made you think about making this decision, and why did this transition actually happen?
So it happened when I came across, I think it's Y Combinator's motto or something, where it goes, make something people want.
Right.
And I had to come
Can
to
you
the
can you
very,
very quickly just explain the people what is Y Combinator?
yeah. So Y Combinator is one of the most popular accelerators in Silicon Valley. And it started like about, I think, 16 years ago or something. Um, and they funded, so Reddit, Airbnb, a Stripe, a lot of large companies came out of YC. And
Hmm.
all they do is they give you advice and they create the environment you need for you to kind of grow, to accelerate your growth.
Okay.
They provide you with funding, and they do many other things.
Hmm.
But they have a lot of great advice, especially when I came across Paul Graham's essays. They were incredibly valuable. They're a great resource for founders. And yeah, and when, as the motto says, when it goes back to sort of making something people want, you can, when you think from that sort of
Perspective, maybe.
paradigm, yeah, from that perspective, you get to see a lot of problems in the world. Like, you get to
Hmm.
see a lot of things that people have that they wish was a little easier.
Okay.
And when you tackle entrepreneurship from that perspective, you begin to really see the problems people have. So the next project was Sellou,
Right.
which which is available in the App Store, and we're constantly improving on, um, by the week. And that was just a really simple problem. It was just selling. Like, we all have stuff lying around.
Hmm.
We could all benefit from having the barriers to selling, drop down a lot more, and just making it easier and making it more
Right.
engaging and more
Right.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we all use sort of some variation of an interesting social media app, like whether it's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Um, it's just a lot more engaging when you're doing stuff in a new and sort of a different way. And when you
Hmm.
combine it with selling, it just becomes, I don't know, it offers a kind of a new experience.
So,
So
in when you started off with Sellou, did you go with this approach of first looking out for the gap in the market and then start off building the product, or was this again
Yeah.
a calling from your end that you want to do something in this space, and then you try to maybe connect with the people so that you can give them a better experience? So, which way did you actually follow in this particular product?
I think it was the first way, definitely a lot closer. Like it was a lot of intentional thinking to see what do people do every day.
Mm-hmm.
People scroll by social media.
Right.
Occasionally they buy. I don't think, I don't know about you, but I don't order from Amazon every day.
Mm-hmm.
But um, shopping for guys, maybe not so much. I guess maybe for women, it's a lot more common. I just really looked at what we do in our days.
Okay.
Like we check our email, maybe we'd go shopping, maybe we check some forum. What do we do on our computers?
Right. Right.
That's when I was able to see that, okay, maybe shopping and commerce and something was something that people want to do if it was kind of presented in a new way.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's still a
is it only giving a new experience to the end user, or is it also addressing some of the loopholes that you can find today in some bigger enterprises like maybe Amazon, or if you talk about India, we also have Flipkart here. We also have a Snapdeal. So did you also try to solve any of the problems that you observed in their ecosystem and coming up with a fresh perspective on that, or is it only about a new experience itself?
it was all of that. So it was a new experience and trying to solve problems. So with Amazon, for example, there's like a $40 monthly fee if people want to sell. So we wanted to make selling, easier. So obviously we're not going to charge anyone for it.
Right.
And, but then it's important to look at, okay, why does that exist? Like what's happening in the back end that we're not getting? And so that's when we tried to tackle fraud and all of those problems that you run into in online stores using machine learning and using a bit of AI in our system.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and then we wanted to make it easier for people to post products. So that's why we have that filter, the background removal.
Right.
And then we wanted, there were just so many things where if you put yourself in the perspective of a seller,
Mm-hmm.
you want as many options as possible because you're the one trying to get, trying to sell, right? So you want to
Yeah.
reach as many people as possible.
Right.
So for it to work locally, for it to work globally, how do you solve that?
Mm-hmm.
Shipping was a huge problem, especially during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Shipping fees were just,
Completely
they were
disrupted, you can say.
it was crazy. I mean, you would pay
Yes.
$70 for a product, but if you wanted express shipping, the shipping would be 80. So then,
Right.
like, what's the point? How do you solve that gap? There are so many problems, and to be honest, with e-commerce, there's a lot of room to grow, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so many products that could be built to make the ecosystem just better for the next generation. Like, if I project myself, 20 years into the future, I don't want to be shopping the way we're shopping today.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a nightmare. It's like you can't reach your audience efficiently. You can't ship, you can't ship through express shipping without paying crazy
Right.
premiums.
Right.
Um, And the way Amazon does it is, like, I'm pretty sure Amazon India ships from within India.
Yes, it
Like, it's
does.
all, yeah. And it's the same with the US. It's the same with, many other countries. So, but then how do we make it, if you're in India and I'm in the US, how do we make it that so that you can buy something from me for as
Mm-hmm.
cheap as possible?
Mm-hmm.
That's a
With the least
very,
amount of shipping price, you can say, right?
yeah. And just the logistics of it, like how many
Okay.
planes would have to fly to India?
Mm.
How big do they have to be? for it to get to that cost. It's crazy. I mean, just thinking about it, we live in a crazy time, like to be
True.
able to even talk about doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's what got me excited. Clearly there are a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love design.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you like the design of the app. Hopefully the users, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I am one of the users, you can say this, and I really found the designs to be quite refreshing if we compare it to any of the other mainstream app today, right?
Yeah,
So the design of Sellou is completely different from them, not in just the terms of how we use it, not in terms of user experience, but also the layouts, how we have laid out all the things in the application is also quite refreshing. So
right.
you can hear this coming from me also as a user, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know about the other people. I think if they want to check this out, then they will have to go to the app store for that, right? It's live on the
Right.
app store.
Yeah, right. So they just go into the App Store and search Sellou, Sellou,
Mm-hmm.
and you can check it out. And please do give us feedback. I would highly appreciate that. We always want to make the app better.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything doesn't work, or if you feel like, we're missing something with making selling easier, I'd love to hear about that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So with
yeah.
that, like since we are talking about selling and the online space of e-commerce, like e-commerce is in
Mm.
itself says that it's an online space. So the question is that some people say that the market of e-commerce is already like saturated, and if somebody new one is coming in this complete space, then it's more of like a waste of time. Whereas on the contrary, we see that many companies in the same domain can coexist, right? So, what do you think about this particular? Maybe you can call it a myth for some people, or maybe it works for some. So, what do you find like the thin line in between?
Um, it is a myth. And from my experience, Facebook was not the first social media app.
Right.
It was the last one.
Orchid
It was,
was there.
yeah, there was Friendster, there was
Friends.
MySpace,
True.
used MSN, AOL. So it's just Facebook presented itself in a different way. It was the first website that had sort of that layout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Instagram was not the first photo sharing app.
True.
There was Flickr, there were so many other apps before, but because they added filters and they made it convenient on, on our phones, and it actually worked. So I think there is this big myth that every space is saturated.
Yes.
If you wanted
Yes.
to start a blockchain company, people are going to say, oh, that's saturated. If you wanted to start an e-commerce company, they'd say that's saturated.
Yeah.
Everything's saturated if you have
If
a
your if
very
your if your thinking process is maybe saturated, then maybe for that person, every
I think
domain is
so.
saturated.
Yeah, and I think also if you have a long list of what is considered perfect,
Right.
like you have this long list of criteria of, you know, of what you consider perfect, then everything would be saturated. So it's the truth is nothing is saturated, and you can
Mm-hmm.
reimagine everything
Mm-hmm.
in your own way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even ideas that seem antiquated, you could reimagine them and redesign them for our world today.
Right.
And so I don't think e-commerce is saturated. I think there's a huge potential and a huge space for people to buy and sell more efficiently, more
Right.
effectively, and in more open ways. So that, if you wanted to, say you have this podcast and then you made t-shirts and you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to sell t-shirts for the pod, with the podcast logo or something, you should be able to do that pretty easily.
Yes.
Um, and it should be synced up in a very good way. Sort of, when you search something on Google, you kind of get what you saw before, and you get sort of recommendations and stuff.
Right.
So in that kind of synced up way, you can sync up our digital lives with buying and selling, which I believe hasn't been done. And then crypto is a huge space.
Mm-hmm.
Crypto is changing the internet.
Mm-hmm. But
So
when you say that the e-commerce is a space is like growing, is currently growing, and it might shape up into something else going forward. So what do you see is the future of e-commerce space? What might be waiting for us to acknowledge, and what more can be done into that? Do you have any idea or maybe a picture in mind that okay, e-commerce space would be looking maybe like this in next say 5 years only? So.
yeah, I do. Crypto's big. I mean,
Mhm.
probably there's going to be more crypto in the future.
Mhm.
The other thing is the world is getting a lot more connected. And we're not connected to the point where I can sell to my neighbor or I can sell to you halfway across the world. I'm not, we're, we're not at that level yet.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work to be done.
Right.
And the future is just people want, what people want is pretty consistent.
Mhm.
People want, you know, commerce. They want ways to generate an income for themselves. They want
Right.
investments to generate more money.
Right.
And just the way in which we do things is going to change. Like crypto is being adopted everywhere.
Right.
No one predicted that sort of 10 years ago when Bitcoin
True.
was still very, very new. I think it was at $1 or less.
Yeah.
So um even like, social media apps, like there's Zoom now, but there's Discord.
Yes.
We could be on Discord, we could be on like 10 other apps.
Yes.
Um, but each app has their own little space. So it's all about sort of what you offer people. It has to be a fresh experience. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people could remember the first time they used Discord. Discord was
Mm-hmm.
a really new and kind of fresh experience. And I still remember that you didn't need to sign up for
Yeah.
Discord,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
just had a handle. You just had your video game handle, which was really cool. And so when you offer people a really fresh experience, you leave an impression on them.
I think if I'm interpreting this in a right way, this is more of about convenience that we are giving to the end user because you see, we are almost moving towards an era where really don't want to even put our credit card, debit card details while making a purchase from online stores, right? We just want the convenience to just two taps away, and you just done with your process of placing an order. Whereas before you would find applications to be having long forms where you have to fill your address, then your card details, then there will be this OTP, and then you will have to then you will be able to make that purchase. Whereas today you would find those steps have also reduced to only maybe one or one and a half steps. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it is true. It is reduced. And like with crypto, it's going to be even like much easier, I'd imagine.
Hmm.
You don't have to give up much of your personal information.
Since you have been mentioning like crypto like for past 2-3 times, so what do you think about the space of crypto, and not just crypto, if I say blockchain in particular, what do you think about the blockchain world which we are moving towards, I believe, and what are your views about it, to be honest? Because
Yeah.
currently you would find many nations who are mostly discarding the idea of accepting the web3 space, but some are also there, you can say in the west, which are also accepting it in a very good way. So what do you see the future of blockchain space, and how far can it go to replace the existing systems which are in place?
I don't know if it'll replace the existing systems, but it's definitely going to be the internet's currency.
Mm-hmm.
The internet will be its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it is in a way its own thing. So um, I believe that the older generation isn't convinced about crypto, and that's why we're seeing a lot of this. But when you
Right.
go down to younger generations, a lot of them own crypto. So it's sort of like the early days of the internet, where when you look at it in like in 1995, not many people were on the internet because it was a lot of young people that
Right.
went on the internet. And back then, the internet was very different. Like if we go back to 1999, even 2001, it was a different world.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as developed as it is right now. Crypto
Yes.
feels to me that it's going to be the same way. At least it's going in that direction. There hasn't
Mm-hmm.
been, people are talking about, oh, it'll just be canceled, or it'll just kind of fail.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened in a decade.
Right.
Like in the decade of Bitcoin existing, it hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was the opposite. What happened was we got more exchanges, we got a lot more financial infrastructure
Right.
than we
Right.
than we had a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem to be moving in that direction, even though people's impulses kind of don't want to believe that
Mm-hmm.
it'll be this big thing. It seems to be moving that way, but who knows? Who knows what the future holds, honestly? I don't know.
Right. Right. What advice would you like to give to the budding entrepreneurs currently who might be trying out with their very first company and are hesitating to take the steps forward? Because I believe when you start off with your very first company, you are clueless about everything, be it how would you build it, how would you form the team, how would you manage the team, how would you market the things, how would you fill the gaps, right? So, what
Yeah.
would be your advice to all those people who are just starting off, or maybe are confused about taking this step of moving into the entrepreneurship space by leaving the existing space in which they are currently? Maybe it's a college in which they are currently and thinking of something to build. Maybe they are doing a job and then they are thinking of building a thing. And there could be like n number of circumstances. So, yeah, what would be your advice to them?
There's a lot of advice I could give.
Mm-hmm.
Um, be very comfortable with uncertainty, because that doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, make sure that you have a strong set of values. So, value honesty with yourself. Like, be really honest about what you really enjoy doing and pursue that. Value courage. So if you don't have the courage to leave your job, but you kind of want to, you feel it in your body, you have to hold courage close to your heart. It has to be a value you hold, because there will be many times in your near future, if you do become an entrepreneur, where you need to have the courage to hire someone, to take a chance on someone you don't know, to fire
Right.
someone,
Right.
the other side of that is firing, which is painful,
Yes.
to deal with failure. Like, if you build something and it fails, you have to get back up after that. And so it's courage is going to be a constant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a very vulnerable experience. Like, you're going to feel like everything's uncertain. And the truth is, that's what it is. That's what entrepreneurship is. But the certainty comes from confidence. Another
Right.
thing is, I tell a lot of young entrepreneurs, be very careful about your ego and where your ego would pull you. A lot of young people feel like they deserve more, or um, they feel like things should be a certain way. They'd say, I've been an entrepreneur for 3 years. I should be successful by now.
Right.
That kind of talk can be very negative, because there's nothing that should or shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Really, anything could happen.
Right.
So, good or bad. So it's important to be really humble to have that confidence to, if you're a software engineer, put in the hours every day coding.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone that's maybe not a software engineer, but you want to be an entrepreneur, um, I guess I can relate to people like that, because I spent more hours of my days on product. So on designing the product, on marketing, on really understanding the subject and making sure that whatever I'm building is what I'm genuinely interested in my heart, and what I'm
Right.
good at, what I enjoy doing. You have to kind of bridge that gap of what you love and what you could offer.
Right.
And I mean, there's so much advice I could give. I feel like
And you have already
it's,
talked about a lot of things, I think, because you just rightly mentioned about how you handle the failures and how do you go about building something. But this particular statement that you gave about the failures, I would like to ask you on that how do you take failures and how do you consume them and think of moving on forward?
you have to separate. I think for every entrepreneur out there, you have to separate what you do from
Mhm.
who you are.
And by that you
So,
mean?
so if you're an entrepreneur and you build something and
Right.
it fails, but you are not a failure.
Oh yeah, that's a
That's
good one.
very different, right?
Yeah.
That's very, very different. The flip side of it, if you build something and it succeeds, it succeeds.
You
Yeah,
doesn't.
it succeeds, but you are not a success. That's where
Okay.
people get tripped.
Okay.
That's where people start tying their self-worth to what they do,
Yeah.
and that's where they start getting arrogant.
That's why you talked about ego and that pulls you in a certain way when you.
It succeeds, but you are the craftsman.
Hmm.
You are not a success. You need to, when you succeed, hopefully when everyone watching this succeeds, you have to keep your head down and continue building, continue doing and pursuing your craft.
Right.
And if the next thing you build after your success fails, again, it failed. But you put
Hmm.
your heart into it, you put the same effort, the same taste, um, and you keep going.
Mm-hmm. You didn't talked about the team building part of it, because I think that's also a very crucial part while you move towards, especially if you talk about building a software. You have to have a team, or if you are like, this gives us also this liberty like software space, that you can be a developer yourself and you can be the entrepreneur yourself as well. Maybe you are the one who is building the product, maybe you are the one who is marketing it as well, and all of those things, right, which are included in this process. But majorly we have seen that you need to have a team to go ahead with, right? And I
Yeah.
believe that that is the most difficult part of building something. You might build a product in a certain time period, but building a team is a real thing, because you are dealing with real humans over there. You are not dealing with the softwares or machines, you're dealing with real human. So
Right.
how
And
how 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 do you go about it, and what would you advise people to manage or build a team?
the biggest piece of advice I can give is, if you're the founder, you're
Mm-hmm.
also the leader.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to learn, and this, I see this with a lot of young men, especially young guys who are engineers. They don't develop people skills because when they were young, they would just start coding from their rooms, essentially, and that's how they'd go about life. But then you need to learn how to be a leader, and
Right.
that's hard. Being a leader means withstanding rejection, taking hard decisions, making hard choices on hiring or firing or on finances, taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
Innovation goes hand in hand with risk.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people, they don't want to take any risks. And so then they lose that streak of innovation. Like if you look at Apple went in, because Steve Jobs took, it went from this almost going bankrupt in the 90s to a massive company today, all
Right.
because of Steve Jobs's risk taking. He took a risk when he built the iPod. He took a risk when he did the iPhone and iPad, but he rebranded everything and kind of had this touch to it. So anyway, so back to your question, it's just, how do you be a leader? You just remember that you're a leader, and
And what do you
you
think are the core qualities of being a leader?
Trust is number one. You need to trust yourself, and you need to trust your own decisions first in order to trust people around you, so that you don't fall into micromanaging. Paranoia is another thing that a lot of leaders that lack confidence fall into. When you're a leader, you need to surround yourself with people whose opinions you trust.
Right.
And people who you value, and people who are also the right fit for the job. So design is a big thing for me. And so when we were building Sellou in the early days, finding someone who understood design, who I didn't have to explain that to, was a big deal. So then when you say, we need to add this new feature, it's going to be up to a certain standard. So there's no micromanagement.
Right.
But people get confused about what trust is. And there's a really good book by Dr. Brené Brown called Braving the Wilderness. And that book explains what trust is exactly. Okay. And I can go to the details, but it's like, you need to, I'll just name a few things. You need to set very clear boundaries for yourself and for your team. You need to have team members that keep their word. You need integrity. If they said they're going to deliver by Wednesday afternoon, it needs to be there by Wednesday afternoon. It shouldn't be where you get to Wednesday and there's some excuse.
Right.
And there are so many other things, like I can't recall them now, but communication is a big one. Generosity, so giving people the space. When you work with someone else, like you said, it's another person, you have to respect their space by being generous about assumptions towards them.
Right.
And a good leader spots talent in people and kind of brings it out. So you need to be able to see what people are really good at, and you need to polish up that side of them so that they really produce work from their hearts. And that's a skill. You learn that by just making mistakes, honestly.
Right.
That's the best way to learn it, honestly. Yeah, mistakes.
Right. And I think people also have such kind of doubts that how do you build up trust, and how much time does it take to build up the trust? I think there is no particular definition, or you can say formula for it. It takes time, obviously. It would not take maybe 1 year to build it, but it would not take like 2 days to build it also. Right?
Yeah. So trust is built over time, and you could lose trust very quickly.
Very easily. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
But I will say on that point, as a founder, if you need to be, because it's a very vulnerable experience, you need to be the first one to say, hey, I trust you. And you need to risk hiring someone that's not a right fit. You need to risk, it's just talking to you, it's really hard for me to say it, but you need to risk betrayal. You need to risk a bit of grief, a bit of heartbreak, because that's where people get confused. You have to. Has there
been instances that you put trust from the very first day in somebody, and the other person betrayed that in some way?
Yes. Yeah.
How did you face that, and how did you come over it? Like, did you start not believing people after that, or did you continue to trust the other people and do the same process of trusting them first and then see what they really do?
Yeah, I continue to trust people. Of course, you have to as a leader, and that is it's really hard. But the person who comes to mind, yeah, I did trust them and they did sort of betray, but I have boundaries. So I didn't trust them again. So
Mm-hmm.
I knew that as a judgment of their character, they have a tendency to do that, whatever that thing
Ah,
is.
right.
Yeah. So their values were different because, if say you and I, say we have the same values, say it's just honesty, integrity,
Right.
trust, vulnerability. If there's anything that comes up, we trust each other to bring it up with one another first.
Mm-hmm.
If those are the core values that we practice with each other, and we bring in, say we're working with a third person that has sort of a different set of values, they like to avoid hard conversations,
Right.
they constantly miss deadlines, they constantly say things that they don't do,
Hmm.
then we would have to, as as a team, you would have to get rid of a person like that. You
Right.
cannot bring in someone that doesn't fit with your environment, with the environment
Hmm.
you're trying to create and the values you're trying to hold, because that would destroy trust. Then you'd
True.
get a situation like you described where you would lose trust in one person and then you lose trust in everyone else.
Yeah, I think of it as, suppose if somebody breaks my trust, my first
Yeah.
reaction would be, okay, I would not trust again somebody like that easily, because I tried to do that before and I didn't have a good experience with that. So as a human being, obviously, my first reaction would be to not trust anybody that easy that I did last time.
Then it's about boundaries. So maybe
Hmm.
last time there wasn't a legal agreement. Maybe last time things weren't very clear, so then you have to set new boundaries and be like, okay, I can trust again, but
Hmm.
I need to ask for an agreement. I need to ask for
Hmm.
50% payment upfront, that
Right.
stuff. So you go through that. And the other thing for entrepreneurs, if you don't trust one of your employees and you don't fire that person,
Hmm.
guess what happens to your whole company? You
Hmm.
will lose
It will
trust
be a
in
chaos.
everybody else. Yeah.
Right.
Whereas the minute you lose trust in one person, you fire them, you hold
Hmm.
them accountable.
Right.
You will, yeah, you will retain trust with the rest of your team. You've lost trust with one person, but you're keeping it with the rest of your team
Right.
that way. Whereas
Right.
if you lose, do you know what I mean? So if you lose trust in one person, but you turn a blind eye towards that,
Hmm.
your whole team gets affected. And
Hmm.
it's so subtle. It's like these are things that have to do with like emotional intelligence,
Right.
which
I call it
EQ,
EQ. Yeah.
it is
You
EQ,
would.
right? It is
Yeah.
EQ. So it's I highly recommend founders, learn a bit of, get their emotions in check so they can really make sense of what's happening in their
Right.
company. When someone's being dishonest, they can catch it. I
Right.
see this with a lot of founders and investors.
Hmm.
Like, there were so many companies which were they were on the news where, a founder lied about a valuation and
Right.
it was valued and then the company went bankrupt. So it's like when you have things in line in the beginning, when you're being really honest and clear about what you're providing,
Right.
uh, you avoid that trap. You're delaying
Right.
gratification, but you avoid that trap. It's the right path. I mean,
Right.
basically, that's what I'm
Right.
trying to say. The right thing to do. So, yeah,
Hmm. And
yeah.
recently, we have also seen that, I don't remember the name of the company. And if I would remember, I would also not say it here. But the thing is that some founder recently in US did a massive layoff, right? I think he laid off almost 900 employees of his company with some reasoning. I don't know what the reasoning was, but he did this Zoom video call and invited all of those people who he wanted to lay off, and he did that on
Wow.
a Zoom call itself, right? So
Okay.
I find it really stupid to make such kind of decisions if you are going through a tough time in your organization, right? Because to me, I think it is more of about you are not doing that great with your finances that you expected to be doing. That's why you are making these kind of decisions. So what do you
Right.
think about massive layoffs, and if you were in that kind of situation, how would you respond?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? I don't know how I'll respond, but
Mhm.
um,
I give you the situation.
yeah, give me a
You
situation. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so you had this yearly target of hitting, for the finances, and
Okay,
you were not
100 million.
able to make it up to that target. You were almost like 50% behind it, and now
Okay.
you see that I have to correct this 50% by by some ways. Then what
Oh,
would you do?
I don't know if I'd. Um, I have to say, as a founder, if you have to lay people off, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm,
Because if you don't, then there won't be a company for anyone to work in. The company's
mm-hmm,
just gonna fail. It's just gonna go bankrupt. So
mm-hmm,
when you have to take hard decisions, you have to be willing and open and just do it in as best a way as possible.
mm-hmm,
But I think the problem is the human side of it.
mm-hmm.
The human side of it is, what if you're the person getting laid off?
Right.
And um, and that's where it gets very tricky. So I would, depending on my relationship with my team, but I mean, I guess I see where it gets complicated. It gets complicated in bigger companies.
Mm-hmm,
Um, it's tricky. I would not take laying off as the first option. I think I'd
mm-hmm,
give people options.
mm-hmm.
And
Like,
I think people are smart. You can give them stock options to put under their name. So, depending on how long they're working in the company, so at least they
right,
walk out with something of value. You can give people a reduced pay. So, there were a few companies that did that where they reduced the pay of everyone.
right,
So, including the CEO, so including the founder. They'd be
right.
like, okay, we don't need this much money to survive. We need far less. This is what we're doing. If you guys don't like
Mm-hmm,
it, you
mm-hmm,
can take it for now,
mm-hmm.
but at least they have a salary going for them while
Right,
they look for something better.
right.
Um, but it's tricky. And the good, taking these actions that I just mentioned that seem better would require far more work.
Right. I
I
think
think
the
that's,
solution that you talked about, which says you can go with the pay cuts, right? I think this is
yeah.
one of the solutions that was also given by Simon Sinek. I think you must have heard about him.
Oh, yeah, I
So,
love that. Yeah.
yeah. So when he talks about like these massive layoffs, he also give the same kind of strategy by giving some real examples, which he has observed before, that some companies manage to handle it by reducing their pays itself, like their salary itself, starting from the founder to the
Yeah.
last employee in the hierarchy, right? And that's
Yep.
how they manage to sustain that particular time period, or you can say 1 or 2 quarters, so that they can rise back again and nobody really gets hurt. And that is more of like, I think, a team strategy. You suffer all or you all win. It's more of like that. So this kind of strategy also made me realize that there are always some better ways to handle the stress, and you can say the bad phases of entrepreneurship. Maybe I am wrong on this, maybe Simon is also wrong on this, because situations vary a lot. Circumstances could be a little bit more different than what he gave example about. So but I think there is always a way to handle these things in a much better way.
There is, and this example that you gave with laying people off, people are going to complain anyways, whether it's a pay cut or being laid off. But
Yeah.
being laid off can be traumatizing for people.
Hmm.
Like it can really be life changing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you got to put yourself in the shoes of the person who has a family who's maybe experiencing it for the first
Right.
time. In that
Right.
case, a pay cut would be much better. Or if if you have to lay people off, you could say, well, look, I'm gonna continue for 4 months. Like give people their time,
Yeah.
4 or 5 months, and then I'm gonna have to ask um, people to leave. But I feel like being compassionate in that way
Mm-hmm.
pays off, indirectly.
Right.
So compassion is an important part, and it's so hard. When you're talking about Simon Sinek, he has great stuff out there on this, but to be compassionate when you're trying to build a company, like when you're almost at war, like you're almost, you're getting the two best people, and you're
True.
kind of venturing off into the dark. Um, Compassion is hard, but it's
Compassion is
necessary.
hard. That's why we see a
Yeah.
lot of these layoffs for last few years. I see. Not like people, I don't think they acknowledge this kind of solution, and that's why we see a lot of these massive layoffs, which is I find a little unfortunate to have, because as you
Yeah.
said, like people will always complain that it's true, right? But
But it's
ethically you would be
yeah.
satisfied with your decision at the end of the day, right?
That's the thing. Like if you could sleep at night after laying off 900 people,
Yeah.
um, fine. But I mean, I'd have trouble. I just feel, I, you know, I don't know. I'd rather just do something else,
Right.
something that's not as painful. But like you said, maybe the company is on the verge of bankruptcy. I mean, who knows?
Who knows
So,
exactly?
um, I don't know. I don't know. It's just
Keeping
it's a
the
hard,
exceptions in consideration also, maybe sometimes you have to, but ethically if you go about it, I think there could have been some other way, right?
yeah, it's painful. I mean, I wouldn't sleep that night if I had to do that. I'm not going to sleep for weeks after that. I think it'll be pretty traumatizing
Exactly. Exactly.
to have to go through that. Yeah.
And since we are already talking about the finances, so you must have also observed this, that there are two ways of running a company.
Mm.
If it is in its very initial stage, either you go with a complete bootstrap model, or you look out for the investors who can help you with that financial thing that you might be
Yeah.
facing, and go ahead with that with a comfort in the sense of finances, and not so comfort maybe in terms of executing things. So which way do you personally prefer, and what do you think? Are you flexible on this, or you already have thought about, okay, I would never go with this way, I will only stick with this one? Or
I
does it
love
depend on situations
It
for you?
depends, I'd say, but for me, I love bootstrapping. I've bootstrapped everything I've done so far has been
Hmm.
bootstrapped, and the reason is it keeps, especially if you're a founder, it would really keep you out of delusion,
Right.
keep you out of, oh, this is working, or it'll keep you out of, higher, going over the top with marketing when you don't have your first couple of users.
Hmm.
And the humility that comes with bootstrapping on a very small budget, with just, that closeness that you have, is just, it's so nice. And
Hmm.
when you manage to succeed from that space, I don't know, this is how I haven't, I'm not there yet. Hopefully I get there. But like, it's when success comes and you've bootstrapped it, it would feel like this massive, or this is how I imagine it to feel like, there's a lot more you could do. You don't have as big of a liability behind
Right.
you. You
Right.
get investors, they're your liability. They're going
Yeah.
to be calling you, seeing your growth. They're going to want metrics. They're
I
going to
think they
want,
might also be helping you out with some big decisions. Maybe they can also play a part of your mentor. But yeah, I think they have both the sides of, they have both pros and cons.
I mean, if you're an investor watching this, reach out. I'll see. I haven't dealt with an investor, as of today. I haven't met an investor that I felt um, I really click with on a on the same
Guidance
level.
basis. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure they're out there. They're out there somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So maybe I guess I haven't found someone to change my mind about this, but who knows? Maybe getting investors is a better way to go. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That so you ultimately mean that that depends. Um,
I mean,
if
I guess my experience is bootstrapping.
okay,
So yeah, I can recommend it for other entrepreneurs. You're going to be living a very, very frugal lifestyle,
mm-hmm.
but it feels very rewarding because everything has meaning. Like every
Right.
dollar put into the business has a lot of meaning to you. I don't know what it's like having investors, but I don't know. Maybe I'll try it out soon. I'll see.
Yeah,
So
I think it goes to
yeah.
trying out first and then maybe making your mind about if that decision
Right,
was
right.
right or not. Right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Okay.
agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's a lot of
It's I
like
don't know. I just read, Reddit, and I read stuff online. So
uh-huh.
I really haven't done it. I didn't live it for me to give a proper
Mm-hmm.
sort of, how it feels like to have an investor. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So I think we can wrap this up here with the thing that we do generally by the end of our podcast is
Okay.
what advice do you have for the audience out there who is watching this podcast? And
Mhm.
you can consider that audience to be completely entrepreneurship oriented, or maybe they are just developers who have the potential to do something great in the coming future. So what
Mhm.
message do you have for all of them?
Does it have to be short?
You can keep it short or maybe long. That depends on your
Okay. I'd
uh,
say just the Nike slogan is just do it.
just do it.
Is the
Okay.
best piece of advice because I think what gets in the way for most people is the fear.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let go of fear. You have to have courage. You have to be able to deal with failure.
Mm-hmm.
A wise person once said, I think it's if you're not failing, you're not trying.
Right. I've also heard
So
that.
yeah, so failure is it's on the way. You can't
Mm-hmm.
avoid it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to avoid failure. Um, so just do it. You have nothing to lose. The only thing you have to lose is time, but we're all getting older anyways. So
Right.
so so just do it. Yep. Pretty much.
Okay. And the last one is that what message do you have for your 18-year-old self?
Oh wow. I was a different person at 18. You know what? I'd probably tell him the same thing. I'd just say, just do it.
Just do
Like,
it. Okay.
just go off and build a company. Like, what do you have to lose?
Mhm. So
18, maybe I.
when you look back at your 18-year-old self, how would you evaluate that? Like, would you like to give some advice to that 18-year-old version of Sal, or would you just keep it in that way only? Like, you have really enjoyed whatever you have done so far, starting from 18.
I'd say just don't go to college. Just learn code. Just code right away. Don't waste time in college. Even though college is valuable in its own way,
In
like
some sense, yeah.
I met some amazing people,
Right.
and I guess I don't regret meeting anyone from college. They were just everyone I met was just great, and
Hmm.
they're just great people. So, but just do it. I mean, go out. I wanted to drop out. I would have never finished college. I mean, I hate that I stayed in college. I stayed for family. I didn't stay for myself. If it was up to me, I would
Mm.
have left.
Okay.
Um, I would have just went to programming right away. And I probably would have surrounded myself with people that are like-minded. Maybe I would have moved to Silicon Valley or somewhere where there are a lot of just engineers, young guys that wanted to sort of band together and build something.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going back to Silicon Valley in a few weeks. So I always say regrets have no value. If you want to do something, you could just do it now.
Right.
So yeah. So I guess I go back to that same piece of advice, just do it. If you regret something, just do it now. Yeah.
That's really valuable to me as well. Like, coming out from you is like very valuable to me personally as well, because with all of your experiences today, I got to know about a lot of things which I didn't really knew before. So yeah, thank you so much for this conversation, Sal, and thank you so much for taking out time for this podcast. I really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation, first of all.
Yeah, I loved it. This was amazing. I mean, we should definitely check in next year or something. Let's see what happens, and maybe
Perfect.
things change.
Around the same time, maybe.
Yeah, right. It's such a good time. It's just the festive time, and I feel like everyone's trying to start something new. So we're in the new year. So.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Sal, for joining me today on this podcast.
Thank you.
And maybe we will do one more podcast right after 1 year in the same dates, and we will see. Yeah, I think that would be a really good thing to do, because we would also be able to evaluate a lot of things which we have discussed today. Also, I would also like to see what has been changed in you personally when we talk about all of these things which we talked about today.
I'm interested. I'm curious now. Like, even with you though, like, it's not just going to be me. I'm going to start asking questions too. But yeah,
no.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Right.
And we'll speak soon, and have a wonderful new year.
Thank you so much. Same to you, Sal. Bye-bye.